All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and the continuation of our BCBA task list series. Today we're going with G10 simple and conditional discriminations. Now, discriminations and discrimination training in ABA is not a very complex topic, but when we start talking about what's the difference between simple and conditional, it can get a little confusing. As always, we're going to try to keep it as simple as possible. You want to keep these ideas very simple in your head. Don't confuse yourself. Don't overcomplicate things. So let's keep it as simple as possible. As always, check out behavioranalyststudy.com for all of our study materials. When you pass your exam, please let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shoutout. Make sure you subscribe for all of our updates. We post Friday, Saturday, and Sunday BCBA videos. As always, work hard, study hard. Let's get going. So let's start with what is a discrimination? It's when a response occurs and is reinforced in the presence of a stimulus. Very straightforward, right? If I have a square, I have a triangle, I give an SD, point to square. You point to square, I reinforce. That's discrimination. Very, very simple. And so when we talk about simple discrimination, we're talking about our three-term contingency. You have the SD, which is point to square. You have the response, which is you point, and then the consequence. The condition doesn't matter. If I tell you to point to square and you point to square, you get reinforced. There's no specific sample, there's no specific condition or setting that's going to affect this discrimination. The response is signaled by a single stimulus, which is the SD. So for example, if you have a blue handle and a red handle, the blue handle indicates cold water, red indicates hot water. The condition doesn't matter. If you need cold water, you're going to push the blue handle. If you need red or hot water, you're going to push the red handle. You're always going to discriminate between these handles regardless of any additional stimuli. So very simple, very straightforward. Now, conditional discrimination, a little different. It's a four-term contingency where the correct response, so we still have an SD, a response, and a consequence. The correct response depends on another sample or conditional stimuli. So we have another stimuli here. Let's say we're using the square. If I present a square and then I say, match this square, well, your response would be to match the square, and I would deliver the consequence. The condition is now the square, right? The model or the sample. And that's the main difference. How about our blue handle and red handle? Well, we're always going to go cold is blue, hot is red. What if your friend asks you to get a glass of cold water? Well, now we've got the additional stimuli, which is your stimulus, your friend asking you to get cold water. So now when you see the handles, you're going to turn the blue handle. So it's a little complicated or more complicated than it really needs to be. It's still discrimination. The only difference is there's an additional antecedent stimulus to worry about. So if you're trying to figure out, is this simple, is it conditional, just kind of ask yourself, do I have just this three-term simple contingency, or is there another stimulus that I need to be worried about? So how are we going to train simple discrimination? Again, it's a three-term discrimination where SD is followed by response, followed by a consequence. And this is what you're going to be training on all the time using differential reinforcement. So first, you want to identify stimuli that are distinct and clearly signal an opportunity to earn reinforcement. So you want discrimination to be clear for simple discrimination. So shapes and numbers and colors, animals, these ideas are distinct. And when you say point to so-and-so, give me so-and-so, do so-and-so, that's a clear opportunity to earn reinforcement. You want to present the SD consistently to form that association, especially when you're just starting out teaching. So if I'm teaching colors, consistently present the SD. Now, there's also generalization to consider and these ideas, but in just general terms, when you're teaching, you want to be consistent because the association is what we want to establish when teaching discrimination. We want the association between the word green and the color green, for example. Those associations are how we teach. It's how we form concepts. So it's very important that we're consistent. Differential reinforcement is the key, right? Why is it the key? Well, if I have square, I have triangle, and the SDs touch triangle, this is on extinction. This is getting reinforcement. So it's textbook differential reinforcement. Differential reinforcement is extremely important in teaching discrimination. And then once the skill is developed, then we can start talking about generalization. We should always be thinking about generalization so you can gradually change characteristics of the SD, use more incorrect stimuli. So the example I always think about is when we're teaching, let's say, colors, right? And you say over and over again, touch green, touch green, touch green. And so you've used that same SD over and over again. What happens when you say point to green or point to the green bear? A lot of times your client may freeze up. You've used only one SD, you haven't changed the characteristics, so you've trained on that individual SD, but we're lacking generalization. So super important that you start to vary your antecedent stimuli in order to not only strengthen that association, but expand the associations. Don't overthink simple discrimination. It's exactly what you know it to be, right? It's very, very straightforward. Conditional discrimination, okay? It's a four-term discrimination where the correct response depends on the absence or presence of another sample. So like we talked about, we still have our SD, we still have our response, we still have our consequence. The difference, we now have an antecedent stimuli or there's no stimuli, okay? And so that's really where you're going to be able to differentiate or distinguish or even discriminate between simple and conditional discriminations, okay? Very important that we have this extra stimulus that's either there or isn't. So how are you going to teach conditional? Well, it's very similar, right? Follow the same idea of teaching, okay? We want to establish the association, explain the relationship between the conditional stimuli and the target stimuli. If there's a closet full of shirts and I tell my client, okay, we're going to wear the red shirt today, go grab the red shirt. Well, the additional stimulus is identifying the red shirt as the one we're wearing. And so the relationship is if I say we're wearing the red shirt and I tell you to go grab the red shirt, now you discriminating to the red shirt is conditional on me saying we're wearing the red shirt. That is the relationship. Again, it can get confusing, but it's really, really not, right? We want to keep it simple. Always keep it simple. Matching to sample, great way to teach the concept of conditional discrimination. We have a field of two. My sample is the triangle, right? So this is the additional stimulus, 0.2, okay? 0.2 is going to be our SD. Pointing is the response, the consequence. Matching to sample, teaching concepts of conditional discrimination, very good way to do it. Start to reinforce discrimination based on the condition or context to promote generalization. Again, we're always thinking generalization. So if there is a condition and you see discrimination occur, do your best to reinforce whenever possible. And again, differential reinforcement is the key, right? It is the best way to teach discrimination because we are reinforcing the targets. We're putting everything else on extinction. We don't want to give any reinforcement for false discrimination. Think about just the possibility of reinforcing somebody who you told to point to red and they keep pointing to green. Well, eventually the association is going to be when I say point to red and I point to green, I get reinforced. It's not the association you want. That's why differential reinforcement is so important here. So to summarize, don't overthink discriminations. Okay, this is such a tricky task list item because you know what discriminations are, you know how to teach them, we do it all the time, but then we start talking about simple versus conditional and we start to get confused and overwhelmed. Keep it simple. They're very, very similar. The main difference is conditional. There's going to be that extra stimulus, that extra antecedent stimulus that's either present or it's not present for whatever reason. And that's going to help you tell the difference between is this simple and is this conditional. As always, check out behavioranalyststudy.com for all of our study materials. Please subscribe for all of our updates. Again, we post BCBA videos 3 times a week. We also have RBT videos as well. When you pass your exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.